So, good morning. There came out an announcement today from the head of the police, Yerushalayim, that Jews should not go up on the Temple Mount because it's a danger. The same thing was said last week by the head of the Secret Service. And they quote as a proof that the second Intifada, which is known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, the Intifada that started through troubles on the Temple Mount, because then one who was the Prime Minister of Israel, but at that time he was the leader of the opposition. He was the head of the most right-wing movement in the politics of Israel, Arik Sharon, whom I knew well. So he went on the Temple Mount, which on that day produced 7 people dead and dozens wounded. And that started the second Intifada, which killed more than 1,000 people. And they say now also, this is not the time to provoke anything that might provoke Muslims. We've had periods of Israel in recent decades which have been reasonably safe. There was a time people said it's safer to come to Israel for Jews than anywhere else in the world. Now, I can't say that anymore, unfortunately. It's the other way around. The way in which things are being handled here in Israel is creating worldwide anti-Semitism against Jews everywhere. So therefore it's important for us to analyze this. We know also Kol Halacha of nearly all the great rabbis of Israel for the last 100 years, and it's based upon clear decisions of the Olei Poskim. It's forbidden for Jews to go on the Temple Mount. It's quite true, there are certain areas where it's doubtful. We don't know exactly where the Beit HaMikdash stood. Also, in the Har HaBayit itself, the Chiyuv Karet comes if a person steps into the area where the temple might have stood. It's a Safek Karet. That's as far as the actual temple area. The Temple Mount, we know there are 3 levels of Kedusha, of holiness. There's the holiness of Yerushalayim, that's the wider city. And the law from the Chumash is, because it goes back to the situation of the sanctuary, the mobile sanctuary, which was established in the desert, where there were also 3 camps. The camp of the nation, where the Jews who went out from Egypt were encamped. When a person had the impurity of tzarat, of leprosy, which came as a punishment for social evils, they had to be outside the whole camp. They were not permitted to be in the camp of Israel, they were outside. Because after all, they don't appreciate the values of good social behavior. And that applied later when, from the temporary sanctuary, we reached the level of having a permanent holy place, Beit HaMikdash. And from that time onwards, that holy place remained the holy place until today. So therefore, that applies to the city of Yerushalayim. So also, in the time of the first and second Beit HaMikdash, people who had the tumah of tzarat had to go outside Yerushalayim. Now, the Temple Mount had a higher Kedusha. And even people who've had impurity coming from the body they're obligated to go through the whole procedure of purification, which is different for different types of emissions from the body. Zov and a Zova, a woman who's a Nida, which still has application today, and also Tumat Keri, seminal emissions also have application today. There was only permissible if a person has purified himself, and then there are many laws of what you're allowed to do on the Temple Mount and what you're not allowed to do. You mustn't wear any leather in your shoes. So today also, all those who are part of the security personnel on the Temple Mount, they all go through this procedure. They're taught how to do it. And unless there's a question of danger to life, in which case they have to also even wear strong boots. But otherwise, they have to go up and only go with special shoes, and only if they've been to the mikveh, only if they keep all these laws. So that's as far as the Temple Mount as a whole is concerned, every part of the Temple Mount. But to go to a place where the actual temple might have stood, that is a prohibition for all Jews, because we're all impure from contact with the dead. And you can't have that purification unless you have the red heifer. And we have sprinkled on the procedure, mentioned the Chumash already. So anyone who goes on those places, so he transgresses more severe sins, and therefore the rabbinate of Israel have always put up a notice that people should know it's forbidden to go on the Temple Mount. Because it's not also, why? Because once you permit it, a good percentage of the people don't even know the laws, and they wouldn't like to transgress them if they would know them. Even some of those who know them, they don't care about them. So this creates a lot of problems halachically. But in addition to that, there's a principle which has always been established amongst the Jewish people from the time of Yirmiyahu, when the people went to the Galut. Wherever you are in the Galut, do not arouse and provoke the nations of the world. Now, the Muslim world, I would say, the silent majority of the Muslim world, like we find the Kurds, for example. The Kurds are very pro-Israel underneath. They don't have any anti-Israel elements in their government. I happen to know it, I've got connections with some personal connections with people connected with the Prime Minister and the government. And that's part of the, today they see the Western world needs the Kurds. They're arming them, trying to, because they're the ones who have a traditional Muslim, let's say, sensible and attitude of keeping to the Noachide code. And the truth is, any Muslims keeping the Noachide code, they have to be treated equally, because they're fulfilling the will of Hashem. In a way, more than Jews, unfortunately, who don't keep, some of them know they don't want to keep anything. Well, so what's happening today, without going to the whole history of, in this year in any case, of this holiness of that mountain, it's the Parsha of the week also. As we already started discussing yesterday. So, and if the head of the security elements in Israel say it's a danger, then the idea that we should have to assert that we are the owners of the Temple Mount, which includes Al-Aqsa Mosque, brings suspicions into even to our friends. Maybe there's a plan to remove the mosque. And there's some Jews who've had that in mind. We know in the past there have been situations when there was a detailed plan how to blow it up, which was worked out by people who were on the lunatic fringe of Jewish society. And we're happy that never happened, because that would happen, I mean, it can create a world war, without a doubt. Because the principle of Jewish tradition has been to work for peace. And that's what say Shalom, work for peace, and even if you've got your enemies, if you can work out a peace plan, David HaMelech says, Ani Shalom. My essence is pursuing peace. I try to make peace agreements. But when I make the agreements, they don't keep them, okay? It doesn't mean to say that we're going to provoke them. I mean, especially as it's the lunatic fringe, we could say, in the Muslim world that is taking over a great part of the Islam religion, especially the religious fanaticism. So we have to be on our guard. And these people, the head of the Secret Service and the head of the police in Jerusalem, they know more what's going on and what provokes them and what brings this tragedies which we're experiencing. So therefore it's very important for us to understand the background to all this, and as I've been explaining, the seed of what is Maaseh Avot Zeman Lebanim is two things. What happened to the forefathers is a sign of what might happen to the extension of the forefathers. And we know forefathers does not just mean genetically speaking, it means all those who've joined the Jewish people, the Jewish faith. They're also part. They also say the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and so I want to go back to what we said yesterday on a deeper level. So if you'll see how Maaseh Avot means two things. It's a type of premonition of what might happen, and also guidance of what we should do in our generation. And that's why it's important. It gives us guidance how we have to react to today's threats to the people of Israel and to mankind. And that's indicated. So go back to chapter 22. We find Jerusalem by page 22, where Avraham Avinu gives the name Hashem Yireh. We explained yesterday, Hamakom Hahu. Something surprising in the Chumash, all the way through, from this chapter onwards. This place of the Ha-Moriah, the Moriah hill, which is the place where Yitzchak was offered up, from that time onwards, in the Chumash, it's referred to Hamakom, the place, it's the place. And as I explained, it was already known at that time, Hamakom, as the place where Noah brought his offerings, and even Adam brought his offerings. But then it was called Shalem. And it says he called the name of that place Hashem Yireh for all generations. I will here paraphrase for you the words which are partly from the Ramban and more from Rabbeinu Bechaya. These are two in-depth commentators on the Chumash. Because what did it say? Why did he call it Hashem Yireh? Asher Yomeh Hayom Bahar Hashem Yiroeh. Today it is said concerning that place that I appear on the mountain of Hashem, the mountain of God who is the Creator and who is filled with loving kindness. And this is the place Avraham prayed there, L'Sha'al L'Dorot, for his time and for later generations. And so I want to explain, Rabbeinu Bechaya says, what is the meaning of Hashem Yireh, Hashem Yemeh Hayom? What's that supposed to mean? What will in future be declared as the place where Hashem appears? I say concerning this, that Hashem sees what's happening to his people and to the world. And what was his prayer? His prayer was, what was the prayer of Avraham at that time? He said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, you have made an oath that you protect us and we have seed that will influence the world, and through me will be blessed all the families of the earth. Well, I am also making an oath. I am not going down from this altar until you also promise me that when my descendants are in great trouble, then you will remind them of this. And that's why the words here are really a prayer. And because this place was given the name Yireh by Abraham, and Shem, the son of Noach, called it Shalem, that's why Kadosh Baruch called it Yerushalayim. Because this city is made up of two saints. Then he says, in the Midrash, what do you mean Hashem sees and Hashem will be seen? Hashem showed him the first Beit HaMikdash when it was destroyed. And then he showed it to him when it was rebuilt. It says later the Chumash, in Sefer Devarim, 3 times a year, you should all appear, Yara'eh Kol Zechorcha, all your male members of the people of Israel should appear in the temple, but they will see it Charev, they'll see it being destroyed. Asher Mehayom Bahar Hashem, but it will even be called the mountain of Hashem when it is desolate, not only when there's a temple there. As it says in the Tanakh, we mourn Har Zion Sheshamem. The mountain of Zion is desolate, but even then you will see that it's holy. And also, it's another pasuk, Bana Hashem Tzion, Nere Bichvodo. In the future times, Hashem will rebuild Zion and we will see His honor. So we see here there's an identification. The Ha Moriah is also called Zion. Although today we have Ha Zion opposite Ha Moriah. But the name really means, Zion means a signpost. Because the Temple Mount is a signpost for the future of mankind. I want to explain this a bit deeper. The Noachide Code, on account of which it was called Shalem, seeks the situation when human beings can live at peace with one another. That's the significance of Shalem and Shalom. And it's supposed to be a signpost how to achieve the peace. And when Hashem saw the Noachide Code, we know prohibits idolatry, but does not have one of its mitzvot directly to believe in Hashem. I could really ask, why is this? Because we can say the Noachide Code is the minimum for any society, any nation, and also the international community of mankind to live at peace. And it's interesting, the Western world recognizes this, because anyone who studies the sources of international law and how to try to establish good international relations knows that this, so let's call it the science of international relations, goes back to the Noachide Code, which was analyzed by the great scholars in the big colleges, Oxford and Cambridge, in the Middle Ages, in the time of Reformation. And not only did they study the Bible for it, they studied the classical Jewish commentators and also the words of the Midrashim and the Gemara, and even the Rambam. This is one of the main reasons why many of the medieval works in Hebrew were translated into Latin in the earliest translations, because these scholars they're all fluent in Latin, and then some even into English. And that's the basis of the United Nations Charter. So that's recognized as being so. But it does not say you've got to believe in one God, not explicitly, although it's inherent. The Rambam says that a person is only really a full Noachide if he takes it from the book of Moses. He recognizes that Moses is the one who had the tradition of the true Noachide code. But the other traditions have entered into the other codes of ancient society and ancient codes of law, but they became distorted. And there's a few volumes of the work called Universal Jewish History by Dr. Biberfeld, who analyzes the development of the Noachide code amongst the nations of the world and also in Jewish tradition. But what is really missing is, why does it say that it's an absolute command to believe in one God? Of course, it's part of it. If you believe in the Torah of Moshe, you believe in one God. So in the latest halachic works on Torah B'Noach, it's also included. But it's not one of the seven directly. And the point is like this. The Noachide code was given after the deluge. The concept of the seven goes back also to the seven colors of the spectrum. The sign of the covenant with mankind is the rainbow with 7 colors, because God is one of compassion. He says to get the nations of the world to this level will take time, and maybe mankind can continue to exist as long as they keep on that level. But when he saw that they're going further and further away in the time of Avraham Avinu, and the culture of idolatry was no longer that they regarded the different idols as being means of coming to the supreme master of the universe, but they began to think that these idols are realities. So you saw we have to have a different power to bring the whole world, as we say daily in the final prayer, our hope and our prayer is all mankind will recognize the one and true God, and all evil will disappear from the world. That's what we say in many prayers. This is the major emphasis of the prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But also in the daily prayer we always say it, right? But the second paragraph of Aleinu is that entirely, that's our outlook upon life. And all the time we're praying for this. So Hashem says, so I've got to create a special society to be priests, to be teachers, to set a role model for the rest of mankind. And an individual by himself is not enough. I need an individual who wants to spread that teaching far and wide, who's going to outreach. That was by Noach wasn't good enough, because he didn't go into outreach sufficiently. Although Noach was a tzaddik, so maybe he'll save the world. Then he saw Avraham Avinu, who came so close and gave himself over to everybody, however far removed they were. So through you will be blessed all the families of the earth. And therefore he said, you are going to be the one who will be the basis for the kingdom of a priest, who will dedicate himself to my service, who will dedicate himself to teach and show through your actions that the power of loving kindness, going into all details of life, will remove hatred from mankind. And that's the concept, which is the covenant. Began with Avraham Avinu, with Brit Milah, and then it became a full covenant at the giving of the Torah. And the Torah is specifically given in no man's land, which is every man's land, so that it will be a message for all mankind. And even at Matan Torah, Esav and Ishmael, who had rejected this covenant, the inner teaching of this covenant, who didn't want to fulfill the concept being the firstborn of Hashem, the first one who spreads Hashem's teachings in the world in a concentrated manner. So they rejected it, because they still had a chance. The Torah was offered to them first, to Esav and Ishmael, one of the other nations, all the other nations they're too indifferent, they're too far removed. But Esav and Ishmael had experienced in part the foundation of the covenant with Avraham Avinu, and Ishmael more than Esav. So, therefore, the essence of the double aspect of Yerushalayim. We know today Yerushalayim is the center, to some extent, of all the troubles of the world. Who's going to have it? Because the way Islam is developed is they regard the Mosque of Omar and Yerushalayim as being their main center of worship. They've turned around what's written in the Quran in certain ways, different interpretation. They put Yitzchak, they put Ishmael instead of Yitzchak. So they even starting saying that Muhammad was also in Yerushalayim, although historically there's no reference. It wasn't said by the early Muslims at all. But the way things have turned out, that's the situation today. And today, Mamish today, this is the most critical question, what's going to happen. Because the government, we've seen the fulfillment, what it says in the prophets, when Am Yisrael, a part of them, they're going away from the Torah, it says really, when they express themselves, they don't want the Torah, not in its purity, some of them, and then they think the Jews are clever. We know Jews are making a good mind. Jews can they have a huge ratio, far more than any other group, for the Nobel Prize. And yet what's happening when there's such critical situations here, for political reasons, they're just taking no notice anymore. So what's political mean underneath, unfortunately? The top of their mind is not the good of the Jewish people. The top of their mind of these people is to keep their place in the government. In other words, there's an egoistic, some of them, I'm not saying they're all like that, but some of them fancy at such a time not making unity government. I mean, when we know what troubles we've had, how many people have been killed, because people have gone up on Tebman. And we have the support of the security professional personnel. And they say, don't allow it. Make it strictly forbidden. And make it clear also to our closest true peace partner throughout the decades, the past decade, has been the King of Jordan. But the King of Jordan, instead of, let's speak about the tragedy here, sending a letter like the British and the American ambassador came to comfort the people who have gone through this tragedy, being killed in such a cruel manner in our place of worship. So the King of Jordan, yes, he praised and gave consolation to the families of the murderers, the suicide murderers. Praised them. It's a very serious step. And how is the world interpreted? The Jews are wrong. We hardly have partners left who support us in Europe. And America also, it's very shaky at present. And it goes to the extent of how far is the world going to reject the plans of Iran. Iran is supporting Hezbollah, Iran is supporting Hamas, and with regard to how far they're going to oppose Daesh is not so clear. Because in the Daesh, that's such an evil and dangerous element of keeping human beings alive. So they need maximum support. But as far as I know, it's still being debated. How far are they going to join in or not? And we know that they've already got non-conventional weapons aimed at every place in Israel. So we're in a very, very tricky situation. So we have to get back to Hashem Yereh, the Har Habayit. Why shouldn't we go? We'll soon find out. Why is it forbidden for us to go on it? We'll go into that as well. But quite apart from halachic considerations, there's a principle in Torah, Chamira Sachantem Isura. Danger to life is something more serious than keeping the laws of the Torah. There are only three things which a person is permitted to give up his life rather than to transgress. And certainly going on the Temple Mount, no person is allowed to bring danger to himself or danger to anybody else. He's allowed to do it. And since we've seen these things, they brought immediate things in the second Intifada, and also now. Because how did all this business, how did it become so explosive? It's only the recent weeks become so explosive. And it's increasing at an enormous rate. And it applies to all of us. We have to, what we should really be putting into making this yeshiva secure, it's beyond our means, but we'll try and do whatever we can. But as far as go to the root of the matter is go and treat the Har Habayit b'kedusha, as it should be. So, now how do we find this also in next week's Parsha, even more than anywhere else? Because in Yaakov Avinu, if you look at the beginning of Vayetze, if you've got the Jerusalem Bible, I'll tell you where it occurs. That's the Parsha we're going to read on Shabbos. So it describes there how Yaakov was in his way to Choron, and it says in page 31 in the Jerusalem Bible, it's page 28 in Bereshit and Genesis, and it's verse 11. He says on his journey, Vayivka Bamakom. Now Bamakom is in the place, not a place, the place. Which place? And interesting, it means two things. It means the place which was mentioned before, the Midrash says, namely, the Temple Mount was called Hamakom. Also, in chapter 22, it's become the place. It also is used frequently, in today's Hebrew, for Hashem. Why is it used for Hashem? Hu Makom Shel Alam. Because He's the place of the world, and the world is not His place, which on a deeper level, which you find in all deeper writings of the Midrashim, the Kabbalah, and also Torah philosophy, Hu Makom Shel Alam means, people think that God is in a limited space. The astronaut went up to the skies and said, pie in the sky, I couldn't see God anywhere there. They think God floats around in a certain place in outer space. That's what Christian society and others think, some sort of a semi-physical, semi-spiritual being. We say God is Sovet Kol Avnim. He is beyond space, and beyond time, and beyond the human mind, and beyond causality. That's what was called Hamakom. And this means Hashem includes in His creative power, not just He created the world, and then He sat inside the world. No. He is the constant recreator of the world every moment. It is His power and spirit that causes everything in the world to live and to exist, which is the meaning of the ineffable name of Hashem. And why can't we pronounce it? Because God is beyond language. And this is recognized by modern philosophers. They speak about this. Even modern philosophers, as a great one, say the greatest so-called secular philosophy, so I've already referred to his basic work, basic logical positivism, who was a strong believer in God. But he said scientific language can't describe God. It's beyond description. That's what he said. His book is based on 7 chapters. When it comes to the end of the 6th chapter, analyzing new scientific, so-called philosophical language which fits in with science, he says when you've gone up that ladder, you have to throw it away and recognize that the 7th chapter of that of which you cannot speak, you have to remain silent. That means you can't express the existence of Hashem, because your language doesn't reach it. It's beyond our language. But still, we say the Torah, Dibra Torah, Kishon B'nei Adam. The Torah is the way whereby the human being can go around with the awareness, Shiviti Hashem Nepi Tamid. I put the name Hashem that expresses He's the cause of all existence, and nothing causes Him. Because when people ask, in some superficial works, they'll say, well, like Herman Wouk wrote a book, This Is My God, and which made a great impact. He was a secular, greatest novelist in American society, and playwright, and then became a Baal Teshuvah. And when he was young, he did go to a cheder, and then he asked the teacher in the cheder, who is God? He says, the first cause. He said, well, who caused God? And the teacher couldn't explain it. So that caused him to leave it. The answer is, what do you mean, who caused? God is the creator of time, space, the human mind, and causality. He's the creator of all energy. He's beyond the human being. And that feeling that He's beyond all of us, how can we do it? Through the Torah. Because the Torah is the name of Hashem, is the way in which Hashem connects with human beings. So this was the experience of Avraham Avinu, more than anything else. That's why Hamakom is a reference to God Himself. And that's what we love. Vayivkav Hamakom, and then he stayed there overnight because the sun has set. Do any of you know what halakha we learned from here?
Mariv.
That Vayivkav Hamakom means he met up with God. He recognized that God is the creator of everything. The same God was mentioned before when Avraham Avinu said he called the name of that place Hashem Yireh. And you'll find here Makom is mentioned frequently. Heshkapa Makom, but it says later on, it says he took a stone, and they say the stone was taken from the Mizbeach on which Yitzchak was bound to become an altar. Heshkapa Makom, and he went to sleep in that place. And then it says again later that here the covenant was given to Yaakov, that when he slept he had the dream of the ladder placed on earth and its head reached into heaven. This is explained to refer to the connection which Hashem has with the earth. And he keeps on mentioning here Hamakom quite a few times. So Hamakom also refers to the Har HaBayit. And the Har HaBayit ultimately contained the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was the place in which the most holy man, on the most holy day, expressed the name of Hashem. And this is therefore the inner link between the world and Hashem. And it says in the Mishnah, in Rosh, as explained by the Rishonim, when a person says the Tefillah, the Amidah, the essence of the word Amidah is to stand in front of Hashem. And you know, in front of the Baal Tefillah, who leads the prayers in many synagogues, it's called a Shiviti. Do you know what the Shiviti is?
Shiviti Hashem Lifnai.
They have a plaque on which it says, I've set Hashem always before me. And the main essence of the Amidah is to try and make a link up with Hashem. And how to make a link up with Hashem? So some say, if you're, like it says in the Mishnah already, wherever you are in the world, when you pray, you should pray towards Yerushalayim. It's the Mizrach, or wherever you are. If you're in Yerushalayim, you look towards the place of Beit HaMikdash. If you're behind the Beit HaMikdash, you look towards the Kodesh Kodashim. And you should, but what happens if, wherever you are, you don't know where you are, you haven't got a compass, and you don't know the directions, then you should have in your mind that you're close to Hashem. And some say you should imagine to yourself, here I'm standing in front of the Holy of Holies, and here I find my link with Hashem. The Holy of Holies, so many represents the time when human beings, they can reach out, not with their superficial rational mind, but with their super rational mind. There's also an aspect within the heart where one can gain a certainty of the existence of the power that keeps me alive and that keeps the world alive. And that's what you should think of when you do the Amidah. More importantly even than the Kabbalah of the words, which you're saying, the words should lead you to Shavit Hashem Lev Tamid, that you always have the name of Hashem, which is ineffable, which you can't even pronounce. Recognize the language is beyond you, but picture to yourself, okay, I've got, that's the essence of the tefillah being silent. The tefillah should be silent because it's the inner silence of the soul that goes beyond language. That can bring you to that level when the human being can experience the presence of Hashem. And that's why Hamakom is used for Hashem and is used for the Mizbeach, where Avraham and Yitzchak were ready to give up his life, and where all Am Yisrael also can bring their offerings to go and subject their material self to be subservient to the spiritual power of the soul. So that's the concept why it says Makom. Now to go a bit further, that Yerushalayim is not mentioned explicitly anywhere in the Chumash. The most explicit reference is in the prayer of Avraham Avinu, Yeru, Yere, and Shalem. But it is referred to in the Chumash, especially in Sefer Dvarim, all the time, where there are many laws in Sefer concerning the future temple, the sanctuary. There are many laws concerning that, all the different offerings that should take place in the future sanctuary, not only the temporary Mishkan. And it always says, Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem l'shaken shemo sham, the place which Hashem will choose to cause His being to be present there. That's where you can experience the divine presence, in that place. So therefore it's referred to as that there's going to be a place, but it was only chosen later. Why does it say chosen? It also says, when you come into Eretz Israel, it says, you should search for it. Search for the place of the Mizbeach, of the altar. You've got to search for it. So behind that is that you've got to work hard to find out which is the exact place of the Mizbeach. But it means something else as well. You've got to search for the Shekhinah. It's only when the people of Israel are ready to search for the Shekhinah. And when did that become completed? Not even the time of David HaMelech, or in the time of his son, that was Shalom. Then if David HaMelech already found the place and paid for it, Hashem did not want the people to conquer that place. That place has to be above all conflicts and above all warfare. It's got to be dedicated to Hashem, the highest level of purity. You mustn't even have connection with the dead. It's got to be connected only with life. Anyone who's got impurity or connection with the dead can't go there. Therefore, you're only ready to have that place when you become purified, when there be no more warfare. David HaMelech found the place. He made the plan because he was a great prophet and very near to Hashem. But he was involved in warfare. So Hashem said, you can't build the Beit HaMikdash. There's got to be peace. When Shlomo came, he used this fantastic wisdom to transform the state of Israel, which it was then the first real government of the whole of Israel. And then Yerushalayim became a world center for the development of wisdom, development of good social life, and all development of prosperity. And surely if there wouldn't have been also certain cracks with Shlomo HaMelech himself, certain deficiencies, it would have, he or his son would have become the Mashiach. But they weren't ready, like also certain wrongdoings. And so until today, this is a great relevance to today, we have to transform the land of Israel to face the challenge of coexistence amongst all mankind. That's what it's given for. Unfortunately, it's going in the wrong direction. And the government, at this time the government is concerned, why at this time did they have to bring up this definition of the law of Jewish nationhood? It would appear it's only done to provoke all the Muslims even more. What, the Muslims are going to feel second-rate citizens? What's going on here? Let's say many Muslims, I just saw a survey, 67% of the Israeli Muslims, they are against terrorism. But who says they're going to be against being treated more like second-rate citizens? Why should there be apartheid in Israel? What they're trying to do? How does it come to them to think about that? At such a time, when you can't make unity government, to bring out this, it's odd. This is prophesied as one time before the Mashiach. The wisdom of all those people are big experts. Some of them are in different areas, and they become like fools, the biggest fools you can imagine. And they're dangerous fools. What's happening? So I think it should be a sign for us. We have to, at the same time, they want to introduce who's going to be a Jew. Ben Gurion went through all this already. Please, Gurion had a bit more sense before he came out with putting rules into the Jewish state to differentiate more strongly between Jews and Arabs. He went and asked everybody in the world, how do you define a Jew? He asked all the greatest minds that he could think of, religious and non-religious. But the outcome of all this, you can read, we've got books here, Jewish Identity, his famous teshuvah, his famous question he asked to all great minds amongst the Jewish people. They came out. There's no other definition you give to Jew except someone who keeps Judaism. And Judaism is basically the Jewish religion. So how do you therefore say that a non-religious Jew is still a Jew? Because a Kun Halakha is still a Jew. Because potentially it's a religious Jew, that's why. But this person is to be born as a Jew, because that person is not just a person by himself, he's a link of the generations. Therefore potentially he's a Jew. It's the Jewish nation's Mamlechet Kohanim. And he says, at the time of Mashiach, there'll be very many Kohanim, he didn't say there'll be Kohanim, use that phrase, will come from the nations of the world. How that will happen is a whole question. How can that be? But that's what he said. But because there has to be symbolic on it, because they can't what their children. It's a whole discussion, unfortunately. But what it means, unfortunately, amongst the Jewish people, they've become so intermingled, so assimilated, they've forgotten what it is, who is a Jew. And they can always be aroused. The whole work of the Kiruv movement is to arouse the hidden Jew inside the secular Jew. Because as I always have said, and this has to be our motto, there's no such thing as Jews who are dati or lo dati. Lo dati, they're lo adai dati. They're not yet religious, because they haven't been taught, they haven't been shown the right path. Well, each person needs a different approach. Can't approach everybody the same way. But you've got to know that every Jew has the potential that the Jewish soul inside him will flower. So as I'll say, even the most empty ones, even the biggest sinners, they're filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Why pomegranate? Because the pomegranate is fruit made entirely of seeds. There's the seeds of Jews in every Jew. And we have to bring them back. And if a person thinks he's already dati, they're already religious, each person at his level has to know, I can go and announce, I need dati, I'm religious. If he says that, that means implies I'm good. I'm very good. I'm a good religious Jew. I'm good. Yeah. that they fall already to the sin of pride. So the Kotzker Rebbe said, I love the Jew, I love the Rosh, who knows of the Rosh, more than the tzaddik who knows of the tzaddik. Today, we all have the tendency to think we're tzaddikim. I'm a tzaddik. I'm right. I'm a tzaddik. I'm a right in the eyes of Hashem. Do I do enough? I don't do enough. So he said, a Jew who is a tzaddik and who thinks he's a tzaddik is clinging to falsehood and pride. And a Jew who's a Rosh, knows he's a Rosh, is clinging to the truth. Because if he knows the Rosh, maybe he'll improve. So let's all together, Tzaddik Tzibor we say, Tzaddik, Beit, Vav, Resh. Initial letters, Tzaddikim, Beinonim, Urushalayim. That's a Tzibor community. So let's all work together. And I'll tell you, the 4 people who were killed when they were middle of Daven, Talis and Tefillin, they are offerings on the altar of Hashem, but they're not offers of individuals, they're korbanot tzibur. These are 4 korbanot, 4 offerings brought on the altar of Hashem to atone for us. Like